So welcome to this episode of the podcast. Today we have a very special guest, a long-time friend of mine I've not met in a very, very long time because we kind of split to a different path, but we met when I was in Singapore. This guy is Mr. Alvin Poh. Alvin, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks. Good to be here, man.
So Alvin, like maybe in just 2 sentences, could you just quickly describe who you are as a person? Because my audience might not know who you are. They might have to Google you. They might have to research more about you. But how about giving 2 sentences that just briefly summarize what you do and why you're here today?
Okay, cool. So I get asked this a lot, so I'm trying to perfect the elevator pitch of mine.
Yeah, let's go.
So here is how it goes. So I basically started my business from zero, scaled it up to $30 million. Sold it off. It was the biggest company in the hosting space in Singapore. And to give you context, I wasn't like born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I came from a poor family, so I had no advantage. I grew all that totally bootstrapped. After the exit, I went to travel because I finally could. So I traveled about 2 years, and then I came back in March of 2020 this year. And then that's when I started like my new thing where I mentor and coach entrepreneurs on how they can scale up their businesses. So in a nutshell, that's my history.
That's awesome. So I'm going to take 3 phases here to ask you a few questions. Now, I don't want this to be an interview. Maybe I want this to be really like a fun conversation going on.
Yeah, cool.
So with that said, I want to know more about you. Obviously, you said that you built the biggest hosting company in Singapore. When was this and why did you choose hosting as the industry that you wanted to get into?
Wow, that's such a long story. So I was actually like I said, I come from a poor family. Mm-hmm. And when I was growing up, I remember I loved to play. I wasn't a very good student. And one of the things that happened was that my dad, he was in sales. So he had a computer. He got a computer because of all the sales like documents and proposals and stuff that he needed to work on. And when he wasn't working, I was like playing on the computer, and I got hooked on all kinds of stuff. I was playing games, and then I got bored of the games, and then I started like tinkering around with the computer. One of the programs that was really popular back then, this was like, I guess it was like 1996-ish. At that point of time, there wasn't anything like Slack or Zoom or Skype or anything like that. The only thing that was around and that was popular was IRC. So I don't know if you remember IRC or if you've used IRC.
Like ICQ? Are you talking about ICQ?
No, man. This was even pre-ICQ.
That's long. Well, 1996, I was only 6 years old, so...
Yeah. So IRC was like this program that... yeah, you see like those very old school like computer like fonts, and the thing is you can still customize it. So you can download theme packs and you can download scripts and customize IRC to how you want it to be, to how you want it to look. And I remember I was like downloading a whole bunch of them, and they were great, they were fun, but I couldn't really find one that really that like I really liked. So one day I just started trying to make one of my own. And that literally started me with the journey of on my journey of like learning how to program, learning how to like design graphics. And well, I guess one thing led to another. I had a relative who approached me to design a website for him. And I guess I was like 16 or 14 or 16, 14 to 16, around there, like late secondary school. And I was just looking for pocket money, right? So I just said yes, and then figure it out. And eventually I got it to work. So he was pretty happy. He paid me a token sum, and that's when I realized, you can actually get paid for stuff like that.
Well, I'm gonna pause you right there. I know you have a lot to share, but you said that when you were 14 to 16, you decided that you were given a project to work on a website, and you just said yes. Let me ask you this question: at the time, were you confident that you can deliver the website?
I have no idea how to do a website, but
just say yes first.
yeah. So I guess at that age, right, all that I was like, all I cared about, like, okay, so that you need to understand the frame. Number one, I desperately lacked pocket money. Number two, I desperately lacked this like knowledge of the world. Like things like consequences and responsibilities had no like bearing on me yet. So there was no understanding of the consequence of like saying yes and then not being able to deliver. I think that's something that's still that I hadn't grasped. So I felt like comfortable saying yes, I guess. And I guess that's the problem, right? Once we become more aware of things, then that's when we realize that, oh, you know, we have all these mental barriers and these like things that
The
limit and
limitations.
restrict. Yeah, limitations that limit and restrict us from doing the things that we should really try doing. So yeah, back then ignorance was bliss, and yeah, I basically was hungry and I was ignorant and I just said yes,
Wow.
which turned out to be a good thing.
I think this is so important because I run trainings and I do a little bit of coaching on the side. And one of the things I notice, especially with adults, is that they, especially if they have not been an entrepreneur in their previous lives or previous experiences, they are very against saying yes. And they will always say something like, you know, maybe I'll think about it, because they're so concerned of the consequences that's what saying yes could create. But if you look at
Exactly.
what successful, we're talking billionaires here, right? Literally, Sir Richard Branson has this quote: if someone gives you an opportunity, say yes first, figure out how to do it later. You know, this was
Yeah.
actually in his book. He was given an
Yeah.
opportunity to run an airline, didn't know how to do it. He had a Virgin Records, had nothing to do with flying a plane, right? And he
Yeah.
said yes because he saw the potential. He saw that, you know what, let me just go in here, get my hands wet and learn from it. And I think that's so important because people really lose opportunities because, not because there's no opportunities. I think this year, especially when we're filming this in 2020, there are more opportunities than ever. I'm sure you know about this, and I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs agree on this. But
Yeah.
what I'm hearing among people that are just getting started, maybe they just got retrenched, they want to start a business this year, they say there's no opportunity, there's fewer opportunities because businesses are closed, people are retrenching. You see the way people perceive different things. And I think
Yeah.
that's so important. So I would like you to continue on with the story, because now that you learn how to program, now you build a website, but what got you into hosting though? Because that's an entirely different beast on its own.
Yeah. So this was me at about 16 years old. So I just got into web design. Because of my relative, I now know that I have a skill that I can like monetize, that people actually pay me money for. So I started posting advertisements everywhere, like free advertisements. So I'll use free online classifieds. I'll use like whatever free source of advertisements there were. And I was kind of like a spammer too. I just spam it out. But the great thing was, because it was such the start of the internet, those advertisements actually converted. Like people actually came up to me, and that's how I got my first start.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting clients. I started building websites. I started getting like referrals, and so I became a freelance web designer back then in like 1998 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I think the next thing that I did was to go to polytechnic. At this age, I think I was like 17. When I
Mm-hmm.
went to a polytechnic, I met my co-founder first day of school.
Okay.
Like I didn't have any friends who went there. So some people actually go to polytechnic and they had friends who go along and they'll be in groups or cliques, right?
Right.
I went there alone. And so I found a seat and I sat down beside this guy. We started talking. Turns out that he would turn out to be my co-founder. We would be really good friends in school. We would do everything together: schoolwork, projects, assignments, whatever. And you know, it showed us that we had a really strong, really good working relationship. And so when the school holidays came, we decided to like, you know, take that further and bring that into business also. And because I was already running like this freelance web design business, we decided to go into a web design business together as partners. And that's how Vodien got started. Vodien at the very start was a web design agency, and we did pretty well. But after a while, we realized that web design wasn't really a good business for like two school kids to work on, because it's such a high touch point business. On top of like school, you still have to like manage the entire pipeline, right? You got to canvas and attract and like talk to prospects, close sales and then do the entire follow-up. And it's a very high touch point. You've got to like,
You were starting,
go
there was
back
just
and
you and your
forth.
co-founder when it comes to working on Vodien, and it was just a web design agency, right? And then you pivoted into hosting, right? So
Yeah.
I want to go straight and talk about, number one, the importance of having your co-founder. Do you think you would have started Vodien without your co-founder, number one? And what is the difference between you and your co-founder? Because some businesses, they need a co-founder. Some businesses, they probably don't, right? So let's talk about that, because we know that having a co-founder is very vital in various businesses. So let's talk about how your co-founder plays such an important role in the startup of Vodien, and why did you decide to pivot from a web design base? I know you talk about touch points, but I'm sure there's more reasons than that into hosting.
I think, well, that's two big questions. So since I'm already like on that topic, I'll talk about the pivot. So it really was about time. I think for us, we wanted to find a way that was more scalable. The design business was a service-based business. And if you look at the economics of a service-based business, if you want to scale it up, you would have to increase your expenses because it's primarily manpower-based. And for something that's manpower-based means that if you want to grow, you got to hire more people. And we didn't want to go down that route. So for us, we looked at it. We were customers of web hosting companies in the past. We knew the market gaps and the pain points that the customers were facing. Because we were customers as well, and that's when we decided, there's a big gap in the hosting industry, and we decided to create a company, create a hosting business that would solve those needs. And the first main point that we looked at was support, because this was like in 2002, and companies that provided web hosting at that time, they either had very poor support or they had very short support hours, where they maybe only provided support during office hours. When we came onto the scene, we wanted to provide 24/7 support.
Wow. That's not easy.
And yeah,
In
it's super
Singapore,
tough.
support people completely in Singapore?
Sorry?
Are your support staff, your customer service team, are they completely in Singapore?
So when we first started, it was just my co-founder and I.
Wow. So you don't sleep?
So we do, but like we make sure the phone ringtone is on like maximum, and we wake up whenever there's a call. Yeah, it's almost like having a baby, I guess. You just have to make sure that you get up and you take care of anything that's happening. So for actually, even for the start, we had like 100% of our customers on one physical hardware, because like we put it on one server, right? And the server is basically a computer. So that computer had our entire business on it, and it was super tough and it was super scary. If anything went wrong with the computer, with the server, our whole business would be down. So that was incredibly terrifying for the first few months, until we had enough money to actually buy more hardware. But that's kind of like how we grew. So we grew, we got more hardware, and then we started hiring.
So you grow one step at a time. You didn't take like any angel or venture capital, nothing like that. Everything was our own money. So you guys were just like doing a lot of web design projects, saved up money, buy a server, and then decided to start a hosting company. Is that how it works?
Absolutely. We were so lean. We were 100% bootstrap, like you said, and we were super lean. We made sure that our expenses and our projected expenses would be covered, and then we were comfortable like hiring or buying new hardware. So yeah, that was the way that we grew at the start.
That's what I like about it, because a lot of people right now, especially in tech or IT related companies, many times they are so involved in this whole tech Silicon Valley type of mentality. They have an idea, they think that the idea is the next Uber, next WeWork, or next Airbnb, and the first thing they do is they look for investors. Probably they approach people like you. Oh, Vodien sold for however many millions, call this guy up and then try to raise fund from you. I'm sure you get calls like that all the time. And what I like about what you share is really important, because you were not thinking about raising funds at all. I think that you just decided to do this because you felt like it's a more sustainable business compared to web design, and you put priority in support, which, by the way, now a lot of hosting companies are not doing that. You'll be surprised, right? Especially internationally. But that's another brand new podcast on its own. But so I want to talk about your co-founder. I think that's really important, because people forget often that how important a co-partner is when it comes to venturing into something brand new. right?
Totally. Yeah.
Is your relationship between you and your co-founder very similar to like Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, where you have one who is purely a marketing guy, a sales guy, and then one just tech guy? Or how is it? Can you just maybe give me some ideas?
Yeah, that I guess that's similar because in the company, I would play the role of the CEO. He would play the role of the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, and that's kind of like the people that we are. He's very detail oriented. He gets down to the specifics. He knows what's going on. He gets like all the nitty gritty stuff, and we play to each other's strengths. Um, I love, like, for example, one of the main things that we were looking at was support. Again, that was one of our core strengths, our core visions. We started off with support and then we expanded into security, speed, and stability. So these were the four main pillars that Vodien stood for. And together that would form the way we provided hosting or provided a great hosting experience to our customers. Now, the reason why I mentioned this is support. It was a big problem, and that was something that you kind of raised or alluded to just now. So at the start we were looking for manpower in Singapore, but as we grew and we had more and more manpower needs, we had sort of like a manpower crunch in Singapore. We couldn't find the kinds of people that we wanted to, and at the kind of growth rate that we had, there was no way that was going to work. So we started looking for other places. Eventually, we found it in the Philippines,
Right.
and so we had a really good business associate who told us about it. He was actually running a travel agency, so he was super kind. He had a spare, he had an office there, a physical office, and he said, you know what, you guys should totally try the expanding into the Philippines, and so we did. We hired a few people, put them under his payroll. He charged us a cost to cost. He gave us like cost to cost billing. So we were super thankful for that because that allowed us to try out that and found that it was actually working. And from there we just grew. We expanded and all that, right? So that would be the kind of stuff that I will be doing and exploring. And my co-founder will be like great for like coming up with the systems and the implementation, like how the details actually work. What kind of department structure would accommodate two different geographies, two different offices? What kind of reporting structures would there be? What kind of pay structures would there be? Right. Stuff like that.
So do you think Vodien would be worth what it was if you didn't meet your co-founder in Polytechnic school?
One of the very interesting interview questions that we had, because our Polytechnic invited us back once to give a talk, I think. And one of the questions that was asked to us was, if we were to be able to turn back time, was there anything that we would change? And like both of us had the same answer. We would not, absolutely not. There's nothing that we would have changed. Because I think there's a reason why things happen, and there's a reason why like our partnership worked the way it did. We worked so well together for like at least 17 years, because that was how long Vodien was running for. And I guess it was that work relationship that was so strong, and we didn't want to change anything about it. That was like how we complemented each other. That was the way we like there was no way I could have grown Vodien to the size that it like was if I wasn't working with him, and vice versa as well.
That's interesting, because I've talked to so many successful entrepreneurs, and one common answer to that question is, if you were to turn back time, or would you do anything different? And many of them, actually all of them actually say never, because even if I fail at doing something, I think there's a reason why that failed, because it put me on this path to who I am right now. But when you interview someone that is maybe not so successful, they will say things a lot differently. Oh, I wish this is different. I wish this didn't happen. I think that's very interesting. But you know, one of my mentors always say is, success leaves clues. You just do whatever successful people are doing and don't regret it. And you just do what they do. If they behave this way, you do this way. If they dress this way, you dress this way. If they say this thing, you say this thing. If they eat this thing, you eat that thing, right? I think because there's no need for you to figure it out. You understand what I'm saying? Even in the fitness industry, I know you're into workout, right? In the fitness industry, there's a lot of fat diets. There's a lot of different new workouts coming up pretty much on a daily basis. I think there's no need for you to go figure out a brand new workout routine. You just use whatever has been working for years and years and years. You look at what Arnold did, what, 30, 40 years ago. That worked for him. So why you want to invent something different, right?
Yeah,
so I think
totally.
that's really important.
That is exactly what I get. Like when I have like my mentorship clients, some of them when I speak to, they exhibit some of those problems also. And I think it's a human thing. I think as humans, we always want something that's like new. We want to find out the secret, right? We feel that we are different and that we need something that's going to be unique from what the thousands, the tens of thousands, or the hundreds of thousands of people have used in the past.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, we really aren't very different at our core. And at our core, we are just human beings. In terms of nutrition, in terms of fitness, in terms of health, there are only certain things that can really affect us. If you're wanting to lose weight, unfortunately, a fat diet is not going to work.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's just calories. It's your metabolism. It's basically knowing what you are eating and controlling that in order to lose weight. Yeah, and that's the same case for business as well. There are just a few things also. And that's why, like, when I look at scaling up companies, there are only like 5 principles that I look at whenever I talk to my clients. And it's bound to be one or more of these things that they need to work on.
Okay, so that was act number 1, which is essentially we talk about you starting out, we talk about your background, how you got into the hosting industry, which is awesome. Now let's fast forward a little bit. Let's go to the moment where you're a little bit more, all entrepreneurs go through this. You're a little bit more stressful because now you got a lot more clients. Now you have to perhaps hire more people to take away responsibilities from you, and you have to, I don't know if you have to raise investment to do that, but you have to retain your clients. You have to make sure they don't go to your competitors, because at the time when you're growing Vodien, from what I understand, America, there's a lot of companies that are trying to grow their hosting companies as well, so that they can exit to private equity, they can exit to hedge funds, so on and so forth. So I want to talk to you during this Act 2 here. So Act 1 was you starting out. Act 2 is where you grow it to a pace, to a position where the company can sustain itself and you can actually exit the company. Because most people, I think we know this, most people set up a company that cannot be exit. They cannot sell, like they'll die together with the company, right? So I want you to give some advice about how you pace Vodien and how you direct Vodien to a way where one day, if you want to retire away from the hosting space, you could do that.
Yeah, and I think this is great because like you said, not enough people focus on that. It's very easy to be working in the business forever, and that's a problem that when I was growing Vodien, I didn't want, because to me freedom was very, very important, and because that was always my priority, I looked at how I could have systems instead, and I didn't want myself, me, Alvin Poh, to be linked so tightly with the company, with the business. And yeah, when you're growing a business, you have to be, there's nobody else. The entrepreneur usually is the guy that's doing most of the work. And the goal then is to grow or scale as quickly as possible so that you can replace yourself. And that's essentially what we did. So there are things that we always maintain control of, which was the vision, the values, the culture, and the strategy. But any other thing would have like systems, would have manpower. And so that's the way we grew. We didn't have the intention to sell, but we were running a business that was fully capable of being acquired because of the systems that we put in place. There were different manpower levels, there was middle management, there were SOPs, processes, documentation, everything that basically ensured that if either like my co-founder or myself were not around, if we got acquired, it wouldn't matter because the systems were really all in place, the company would still continue running. And I think that's essential, because if you build a company that way, then even though you might not necessarily sell it, your company will survive and will do well without having that presence, the presence of the owner around. And that's what I believe. That's what I tell my clients as well. That's what I want to veer them towards, and try to get them to see the benefits of that route.
Right. So just to recap, you were really focusing on saying that number one, we got to have a vision for the company, and then we have to build systems to ensure that the company can run itself, so that if one day, let's say that you just maybe you had to sleep for 2 days, right? You just super stressed, you just got to go away for 2 days, and the company can still run itself. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's talk about this. When did you start implementing this system? Like how long into the business, in the hosting business, that you started realizing that, oh, I gotta implement systems?
I think it was like maybe a third in our journey. I remember going for holidays and realizing, you know, I like traveling and I like my business also. So there are two things that have to be there. But I know that I don't want to be doing stuff in the business that I can find people to do, like marketing or advertising or even tech or support or sales, whatever function it is.
Mm-hmm.
These are functions that can be trained for, right? And I guess I'm looking at myself as the CEO and my roles in the company and how best to maximize the value that I give my company. And the value that I give my company is essentially that of strategy and visioning. And that's also why in my 5 principles, the vision is such a core fundamental pillar, because I think that affects everything that the company does. And that's where you don't want to hire someone to do, because you will never be able to find an employee that will come on board and will give you the kind of vision or strategy that you will give, simply because of the fact that you know the company and the vision best, because it stems from yourself. And therefore, anything that comes from that, which is like strategy, your hiring structures, the way you invest your company's funds, the way you handle your customers, all gets impacted. Yeah, so that's why I feel like scaling is such an important part for us. When I realized that connection was there, that the relationship was there, I started like testing out more and more systems. I started like letting go more. At the start, it was tough because at the start, as an entrepreneur, everything was all bootstrap, everything was all scrappy. You had to do everything yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The one key like changing or turning point was, letting people own stuff. Even though you know that you might be able to do a better job, you've got to like make sure that you let them do that, because if not, they will never grow into the role. They will never grow into the responsibility. But I think it was that turning point, and then after that, we realized, that's how things need to be done. We have to start empowering people. We have to start like building up the processes and the systems so that other people in our company could do those roles, and the company as a whole can grow and scale. So when we realized that, I guess there was no turning back. We just had to focus on all those things.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, like, when you were starting to implement the system, because I started to do this for a few of the companies that we're thinking about buying. So what we do is that we go in as a consultant role, or we try to implement system for these companies. And just as you say, many times the principal of the company could be the managing director, could be the founder herself or himself. They are perfectionists. It's because it's their baby. I always say the business is your second son or your second daughter, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's almost like that. And what was the biggest challenge that comes that you have to overcome, right, when you were implementing the system? Because I see this firsthand with some of the smaller businesses that we were working on. What happened was that when we were implementing systems, some employees were just not for that, and they had to be let go because they couldn't follow the system, because they have their own way of doing things. So that was the biggest obstacle, letting go great people because they couldn't fit into the system, and prioritizing the system over great people. So I want to know, what was your biggest obstacle or challenges when you were implementing the system into Vodien at the time?
So I mean, when we did that whole journey, we basically had to make the mistakes and learn from there, right? I mean, if I know the things that I know now, I would have done things differently. But you are right in the fact that the system must be bigger than the individual, because an individual can never or should never be the sole like weakest link or the bottleneck in a company. You don't want that to ever happen, because if that's the case, your company or your business is not systemized and will never scale. So I guess for us, the the culture that we created was tremendously important. We had what we call the cycle of good work, and that has three components, right? Ownership, failure, and teaching. So we believe that accountability is very, very important. If you are the owner of a role or task, that will make you a lot more accountable rather than being like told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like a kid, right? I mean, if a kid gets told by his parents to do something, the kid's like, I don't do that. Man, humans are the same. The guy can grow up to be an adult. The same thing will happen. Nobody likes being told what to do. But if you know that the guy is like is doing what he needs to do and he owns like that whatever role or task that is, accountability is so much easier because it's like the guy is volunteering, the guy is owning it, the guy is like wanting to do it.
Right.
And so I think that's the one key difference that must be encouraged.
Right.
And once you do that and you have a culture of like supporting failures, failures not in the sense that you're failing just for the sake of failing, but failing because you're in the direction or in the process of reaching a goal. I think that's great because there is no way you can get to a goal without failing if you've never done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the times in the things that we do, these things are new. These things are brand new. We had a brand new like customer support system. We had brand new like security problems that we needed to fix that we've never seen before. We had like customer growth that we needed to handle, and we've never at that point, right? So we have to think about the problems or the possible like consequences and all that, and all these things would mean that sometimes we will fail.
Mm-hmm.
But the company's culture is such that so what? Do whatever it takes, try whatever it takes, because even if you fail, it doesn't matter because it gets you one step closer to where you need to be.
Right.
And I think everybody in the company is aware of that. And this is something that you can't just write down and say that this is the company culture. You got to actually live, you got to actually breathe, you got to actually do it. Because mistakes will happen and you have to not penalize because of the mistake, right? You've got to like learn from the mistakes and move on.
Yeah, I always say this, in business, there's no such thing as failures. Failures are just, or mistakes and failures are just lessons in disguise.
Yes.
You just need to turn in a lesson so that you never repeat the same thing. If you repeat the same thing, then we have a little bit of a problem from that, right? But if you learn from it and you improve it, that's awesome. I think everywhere, this is something that most companies need to actually implement, especially the modern way of doing things, because business has changed. Like 30, 40 years ago, most businesses are very slow paced, right?
Yeah.
We do the same thing again and again. But today with the internet, the participation of social media, things are changing. Like we're not even talking about every month. We're talking every day, right?
Yes.
Especially in the IT world, and people need to adapt. And when it comes to adaptation, there's going to be mistakes. When it comes to evolution, there's going to be problems. There's going to be issues. And sometimes as a leader, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you are just a manager, you have to be in a position where you're able to understand someone's going to make that mistake. You got to have that expectation and then just adjust from it and learn from it. I think that's really, really important. Now, I want to go to Act 3 now, which is where you're selling a company or you've been approached. I'm sure you have been approached prior to who you sold it to by probably, I know in Singapore it's very active with the capital market. There must be private equity, maybe even government funds or family offices that want to invest in you. Can you tell some stories about that? Because that's part of the story that people don't hear about. All they read is the headline news. Vodien sold for X amount of money and goodbye. They don't even read the rest of the news, right? So I want you to share stories about when you were first approached to maybe from someone to buy a position in your company or maybe the entire company. Let's start there.
Yeah, okay. So from whatever I said just now about how Vodien was structured, that was literally the same way, the same like like even when it grew, that was the way that we treated Vodien. So the vision never changed. First and foremost, we were customer centric. We were customer first. The customer's needs were always front and center, and everything else just fell into place around it. And I guess this was one of the main reasons also that we never really went ahead. You're right. Singapore had like a ton of interest. And because Singapore hosted so many conferences and exhibitions, every single time there was one in the city, in the country, people will come just knocking on our doors wanting for a meeting. And I mean, at that point of time, we were already like the top in Singapore. And we
Who
had
are these people? I want to know. Who are these people? Are they just random
so
bankers or
no,
what are they?
no. But there were bankers also, but there were private equity, there were operators. They came from everywhere. They came from Europe, they came from the
Wow.
US, they came from Japan, uh, yeah, Malaysia.
Mm-hmm.
There were people everywhere. And yeah, I guess there were always someone that was interested. And the thing is, because of our focus on the customer, we never felt comfortable going ahead with any one of them because it always seemed like they were just trying to expand for expansion's sake.
Right.
And one of the things that we would always look at was how the company that they came from or that they were running was structured or was like positioned. And we would always see them being like, it was like a land grab or a customer grab, and to see who or what grew the fastest. And that to us was not the point. For us, we always wanted to make sure that even if we grew, the customer was well taken care of. If you looked at customer satisfaction and customer reviews for Vodien when we were running the show all the way up to about 2017, 2018, it was like fantastic. We will consistently be getting over 94% customer satisfaction. It was incredible. And even if we had a customer that was dissatisfied, we would go out of our way to make sure that things were made right. So that was the kind of stand that we had. And that's why we were never comfortable with, say, a purely financial transaction or purely like a transaction purely to for expansion's sake.
Right.
And that was the case until that buyer came along. So they were Dreamscape and they were listed in Australia. So Dreamscape is the holding brand, but the operating brand for them was Crazy Domains. Crazy Domains, like us, was founder-led, and they were like us also the largest in the country. And when we saw them, and when we traded stories, we had a very, very similar background. Our growth path was about the same. We were even exploring the same kind of software, the same kind of problems. And so we felt like there was a match. And, we thought that there was going to be a good like partnership moving forward. And so that's why we considered and eventually went ahead with the deal. Yeah. So
let's talk about a specific of the deal. You can talk about things that you can talk about, and maybe there are some things that are PNC. Maybe you can not talk about it. But we got people that are one of the things that we do is that we also like to buy companies. I don't run a private equity, but of the way I run my investment firm is very similar to a private equity, except that we don't have a fund. We raise a fund after we've got the financial statements. So it's the opposite way. And I want to share one thing why I think you were not selling to private equity. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, because this is what I saw what they did with domain companies and hosting companies in America and Europe. What they were doing was that they were buying up companies just because they liked the recurring revenue of it, but then they'll cut half the staff or quarter of the staff that were very crucial to give customer-centric services. Like I myself, I've been doing internet marketing. That's how I got started when I was 15 years old. And I've always been subscribing to a hosting company, and I had to always switch after an acquisition was happening to my hosting company. The moment they were acquired, a month or 2 months later, the customer support just started to go really, really bad. Like I'm not gonna name one hosting, but one hosting that I was using for I guess over a decade now. What they were doing, that was perfect. Like every single time you go to live chat support, you get connected within 5 minutes. Perfect, right? When your website is down, you are panicking, like you want to get connected to someone real quick, right? They were acquired, I think, a couple of years ago, and the services have never been the same. The waiting room in a chat is like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and it's insane. But I guess that's the reason why you decided not to sell to those typical private equity companies. Am I right?
Yes, totally. Because we can really see that customers were not their priority. There was one company, very, very popular, very, very famous. I remember going there just to check out things. And if you go launch a live chat with them, the wait time was in hours. Like you literally have to wait for multiple hours just to get a chat session. And that to me was just incredible. I would never put my customers through that because I just basically think of how I would feel if I was a customer, and I'll be like, no way. So there wasn't because of this, we never felt comfortable going ahead with somebody that never was in the industry or didn't know the industry and didn't feel for the customers. And that's why private equity and funds are usually not something that we consider.
So you sold to a company that were pretty much in the same business, selling to the same demographic. And you said that one of the reasons why you like them was because they share the same philosophy, right? So when the deal happened, what were you feeling when you were offered? They were telling you this is our offer. Did you accept the offer, or did you negotiate? What was the whole entire situation? Can you maybe illustrate or maybe tell the story where you were maybe in a boardroom meeting with them? How did discussion go? How did you come up with the evaluation?
Yeah, so like we were very product and customer centric, right? So we, as a CEO, I don't even really bother with investments or investors. So much that if you wanted to reach out to me back then when I was running the company, I wasn't even on things like LinkedIn. So LinkedIn was basically how the Dreamscape CEO reached out to me. He sent me a message on LinkedIn, which I completely ignored. I just not ignored, but I did not know. I did not know there was a message.
Right.
And after a few days, when you realize that this guy probably never checks his LinkedIn, he sent my support desk an email. And our companies were actually in the Philippines also. And in the Philippines, they were actually next to each other. Not in the same building, but in adjacent buildings.
Right.
So when my guys saw his email, they were super excited. They notified me, and they were starting to talk amongst themselves as well. So I contacted him. We arranged for a meetup in Singapore, and that's when we found out that they were actually looking to acquire. And yeah, there were negotiations, of course. I think the price that they wanted to come in at was not something that we were comfortable of, simply because of our market position and because of our strength in the industry. And so eventually we agreed to that price, the acquisition price, and yeah, then we moved ahead.
Was it a full cash buyout, or was it a share swap, or what a percentage?
So Vodien was fully acquired, and this is information that you can find online because they are a publicly listed company.
Right.
Vodien was 100% acquired, and it was for part shares, part cash. But that was in 2017. In 2018, I think it got acquired again. Like the company got acquired by web.com. Mm-hmm. So that was when I also got out completely as a shareholder also. Mm-hmm. So I have no link to the company whatsoever right now.
Okay. So I think that's really interesting, because I think a lot of business owners, especially SMEs or small business owners, they have never thought about selling their business. And when they were approached, they do not know how to go through the process, right? So let's say you are to advise a typical normal business. We're talking about maybe they're a stationery shop, or maybe they could be a digital marketing agency, or maybe they could be a hair salon chain, whatever it is, right? Let's just say that very similar situation to you. They systemized everything over the last couple of years, and then suddenly this year, one huge public listed company went up to them and said, "Hey, I want to buy your company," right? Can you maybe share some tips or some ideas or some strategies on how they should prepare for meetings, how they should prepare for the potential sale of the company, so on and so forth?
I think it's a matter of valuation also, and valuation depends on many factors. One of which is the position or the market share of the company. Right. If, like, for example, you were a hair salon and you only have one shop, it's very different if you were running maybe 100 over the nation or in the country. These are the things that all affect valuation. So it really depends on where the business owner is in his entire journey. But no matter where he is, I think the negotiation will never ever be in your favor unless you have systems. Unless you can say, yeah, I have a business and it is growing and it has healthy margins and everything like that, and it does not depend on me. I can literally take a break and I'll go to I don't know, Switzerland for 3 weeks. Right. And not be connected to the internet and come back, and the company will have grown. If you can do that, I think that's something that anybody would want.
Did they make you stay for a couple of years for transition?
yeah, I mean, there was handover, of course, because there were certain projects that were running at the time, but
Right.
those were not crucial to the running of the operational of the company. It was for the growth of the company. So I did what I needed to hand over whatever I had on my plate, and then I left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. In regards to you saying that some businesses don't have systems, that's why one of the reasons why they couldn't get like a full price on their valuation. So they value the company at, let's say, just to make math simple, $10 million, right? If they got our system and they are the only person that's churning out that $10 million, many times a company will come in as a buyer. They will not buy 100% of the company, right? Maybe just 51%. And then the rest, they want you as an owner to hold on to it so that you still have skin in the game, so that you can still run the show, right?
Yeah.
So having a system is so vital. What about those businesses that potentially they just can't have a system at all? Like maybe they're so dependent on one individual person to run the show. Like for example, let's say, what would be a good example? Let's say a digital marketing agency, right? And the owner is also the guy that go out there and do business development. The owner is also the guy that trains all the staff to do digital marketing, right? How would you advise this person to maybe look into selling his company in 2 years' time in a very smooth transition process?
Well, so when I say systems, it's not a complicated software program. Sometimes it's just putting down onto paper what you have in your mind. Because as business owners, there's so much that's going on. But it's actually really, it's not easy, but it's a straightforward thing to say, okay, so if it's digital marketing, we have a client that comes on board. What are we going to do? How are we going to approach the client? What are the things that we're going to present to the customer or the client? What are the touch points? How are we going to structure the interactions? What kind of campaigns do we run for this company, or how do we know what kind of campaigns to run? All this is happening in your mind, but you can actually translate them into thoughts. These are like certain questions that you always ask when you have a new client. Are they selling a product, or are they running a service, or whatever it is? And then from there, you notice that there are certain things that can be put down on paper that can be part of the process that people will follow. It's like cooking an egg, right? Like if you want to make scrambled eggs, I have my own recipe, you will have your own recipe, and it's all in our mind.
Yes.
The problem or the key is to just translate that into a easy to follow recipe. And when I say easy to follow, it basically means if I take that piece of paper and I give it to someone else, they'll be able to get to like 80% of the results just by following the piece of paper. So it's really a process of documenting and being able to communicate properly. And that's the key. I think most of the time when people say that it cannot be systemized, it's more of a case that they do not know how to approach it properly. But most of the times, I definitely think it's possible.
Right. So I want to talk about what's next for you, because you said that right now you're mentoring quite a number of people and helping them with their businesses, right? What else are you doing? Are you doing some angel investments, or are you looking at doing something? What's your focus right now?
In terms of investments, I'm only in the public markets. I had some angel investments in the past, but for now, right now, I'm only concentrating on public markets, and on like my own career, I'm focusing on mentoring and coaching other entrepreneurs, because my specialty is to help people systemize and scale up. That's what I'm doing. So that's taking up most of my time right now.
So if some of my business audience would like to actually contact you and reach out and see how they can get themselves mentored by you, but obviously someone who's very successful at growing a company, systemizing a company, scaling a company to a way that you actually got a very good deal when you sell. I don't know the audience listening if they know, most deals don't work out like your deal. Most deals are on earn-out basis. I'm not sure if you know, right? Especially right now. And most deals are when they just come in and buy 51% or a small chunk of the company, even 20%, right? But you got a really, really good deal because you did such a great job setting the foundation for Vodien, and that's why the transition was super, super great for you. So in terms of how they can contact you, what would that be? Would that be on your social media or website or anything?
I mean, I have my website. They can book a strategy call with me. It's at alvinpoh.com/strategy. But I also have like other resources on my website that they can visit. I'm also on social media, on Instagram at Alvin Poh Official, or Facebook as well. If they search Alvin Poh, you'll be able to find me. So
I like following Alvin on Instagram because on Instagram story he posts a lot about being minimalistic, right? I remember he was complaining about your iPad and your computer. I thought it was really funny. because I had the same issue. The reason why it's funny is because I was had the same issue. And I also like to be minimalistic because clutters, I believe that physical clutters builds mind clutters too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
See so
yeah,
much
absolutely.
messiness. You can't think straight. That's my opinion. But some people find that messiness is great. For me, I just think that you cannot focus when you have so much things going on.
Absolutely. I completely agree. That's one of the things that made me realize,
Right.
I want to concentrate on minimalism because then it releases me from the other stuff that really matter.
Well, Alvin, thank you so much for parting with so much life experiences, business
Cool.
experiences today.
Yeah.
I hope to talk to you again in the next few weeks, hopefully, or months, whenever Singapore is open back again and Malaysia is open
Yeah.
back again. I'm
Yeah.
dying to go to Singapore right now, but
I'm looking
see you
forward to
soon.
that too.
And
Yeah.
thank you so much for showing up on this podcast and actually giving so much amazing tips that I personally learned something new from this today.
Awesome. Yeah, good to know, man. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me here.